Okay, first of all, good afternoon, good evening, and for those who are coming from Malaysia, Ariella is from Malaysia. It's late evening there, it's almost night now, it's 8 p.m. First of all, thank you so much for coming on board to this webinar. For the sake of Ariella, I'm going to explain a bit what Herut is, so that she would understand what Herut is all about. This is her second time on the platform. Herut is an international movement for Jewish unity, Zionist pride, protecting the Jewish people worldwide, and Zionist education. Herut operates per the ideals of pre-World War II, the Second World War, Zionist leader and philosopher Zev Jabotinsky. In this world where anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel is at the pandemic levels, it is important to be part of Herut, a critical movement dedicated to protecting Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. I would like to introduce our speaker today, Karma Feinstein Cohen, our Executive Director of Herut World. Welcome, Karma. Just a short bit of who Karma is so that you would get to know her. Karma moved to Israel from New Jersey with her family when she was 11 years old, serving in the Israeli army, and received her BA in political economics from Tel Aviv University. She lives currently in Shaarei Tikveh with her husband and 2 children. Karma is a member of the Presidium of the Zionist General Council of the WZO and has been a Jewish Agency committee member since 2002. For those who may not know this, on the 23rd of November last year, just 2 months back, Karma was elected as the chairwoman of the Council of World Zionist Youth Movements at the Ben Gurion Hall in the National Institution of the World Zionist Organization, the WZO. After previously serving as deputy chair of the council from 2015 till 2020, she is the first woman to serve in this position. In her capacity as chairwoman, Karma will lead the Zionist youth movements in all efforts to strengthen Jewish Zionist informal education throughout Israel and the diaspora. So I open the floor to Karma now. We shall learn something today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, after an introduction like that, Rivka, I think I can go home already. I think we can finish. I mean, my ego is already overly boosted. And you know what? Pardon?
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Honestly, thank you. You know, the end begins when our self-pride takes over. So our gaiva, as the rabbis like to call it. So I am but a servant to the Jewish people. That's all. It's a great privilege. It's zchut to serve the Jewish people, and I see it as such. So Rivka asked me to discuss a topic which almost seems like a given to most people, and I would say to others, a complete anomaly. Complete, forgive me, anomaly. No, I don't have a cold. Thank God. At least I haven't had, at least yet. I don't have COVID yet. Hopefully it'll pass over me. But hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, although it seems that half of Israel at this point has COVID. So, oh my God, board members from the United States awake at 7 a.m. on a Sunday.
Yes.
It's Sunday? Go back to sleep.
Jeff,
What an honor. Jeff Dunnett's national board member of Herut North
No
America.
honor.
To me,
thank
it
you,
is.
Jeff. Thank you for coming on.
It's because Rivka is a special person.
Toda.
I agree. So being the blessed person that I am to be surrounded by fabulous people such as Rivka and Jeff and other wonderful people who are on this webinar today, we're going to have a somewhat of an open discussion, but basically touching upon things that, as I said a minute ago, are either completely obvious to many or a complete anomaly to others. And we have to bridge, we create a bridge between these two different perspectives and bring an understanding, at least within the Cherut movement, an understanding of why we do what we do. Now, Rivka, if there's anyone who finds the English too fast or needs anything from me, give a shout out, please.
No, I think they're fine. They're fine. Thank you. Any
Perfect.
questions, you can post it on the chat, or we can have a Q&A later at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's, we're going to reel back a little bit and go to Zionism. What is Zionism? Very, 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 very quickly, just to wake up our, our memory, those cells in there that, need to be every once in a while woken up, and or to reiterate things that we already know. So Zionism, as defined by Cherut or by many Zionists today, is the civil rights movement of the Jewish people. What does that mean? It's the understanding that the Jewish people have a right to self-determination. The Jewish people have a right to a homeland. Shocker, just like every other nation. Shocker. Wait, why? Okay, so 2,000 years, the Jewish people were basically all over the globe. It even starts before then. They say in the beginning of the first exiles of the 10 tribes, and we have Jews literally from one side of the world to completely the other, in all shapes, shades, sizes, cultures, you name it, we're there. So how did we make it through 2,000 years of exile and still stay who we are today? And that is the beginning question, and we'll circle back to that at the end of this discussion in order to basically, give you a well-rounded answer to the question of why do we need Zionism today? So theoretically, all of those who understood that there is a need for a solution to the Jewish problem, that there needs to be a homeland, that there needs to be a safe haven, that there is anti-Semitism, that Jews are being killed, they're not safe anywhere. The understanding was that the only way to solve that, after all sorts of other things were discussed, is the establishment of a Jewish state. As we say in Hebrew, ad kan, until now, everything is relatively clear. So there is what Zev Jabotinsky, the ideological spiritual leader of the Cherut movement, says is the breakthrough period. What is the breakthrough period? The period in which the leaders of the Jewish people understand that they have to do something to change the situation. The masses have to be convinced that there is a need for a Jewish homeland, because the masses were not all convinced. Many of them were comfortable where they were, and many were not comfortable, but the change seemed too dangerous. Many were not comfortable, but sometimes the known, something that we know is better than something that we don't know, even if what we know is not so good. So we had to go through this very long period of convincing people that Zionism is even something important. Some people believed that they could join forces with growing ideologies in different countries, like socialism, for example, in Russia. In times before then, we had emancipation in France. So all different types of ideologies, the Jews found themselves latching onto them, connecting onto them. Normally, the result of that was catastrophic for the Jews. Normally, the cultural assimilation in Germany, exactly, Michael. Normally, we found a complete disaster after we latched onto one of these local ideologies, which only brought us to the understanding that, as we say in Hebrew, im en anili mili. If I don't take care of myself, nobody will. What is the answer to that? A Jewish homeland. We reached that understanding somehow, somewhere. Many geniuses, by the way. You won't find me trashing other Zionist thinkers because I believe that every single one of them played a very important part in the establishment of the state of Israel. I cannot but, give Ben-Gurion credit with all the things that he did that I can complain about. And actually, Jeff and I had this discussion not long ago, was that he had the courage to declare the state of Israel, to declare that there, this is something that, is not a something to a laughing matter, to say that, a Jewish leader in pre-state Israel gets up, British mandate, wars and whatever, and he declares the state of Israel. So many people dedicated their lives, lost their lives so that there could be a Jewish state. A Jewish state is established. There's horror in the middle of the streets. People are dancing. People are ecstatic. A war breaks out. Divine intervention and a strong Jewish people. Hashem gave us his blessing. A miracle happened. We won the war. Done. Rah. Exactly. Done. We have a state. Done. But is it done? So wait, we established the Jewish state. We have a country. What next? Now let's circle back to Parashat Lech Lecha. Okay, let's circle back to the Torah. It's incomplete, says Mordechai. Yes, let's circle back to Lech Lecha. What does Hashem say to Abraham? Anybody got guts in the group to read or you can open it up and read it to us? Anybody want to speak? Yes, Jeff, please. You're muted. Jeff, you're muted.
Basically, God tells Abraham, leave your father's house and go to the land I'm going to tell you to go. And the land he told him to go is now called Israel.
And and you will build a nation. You will build the first thing, go to this land and you will build a nation. Wait a second, build a nation. We have a country. We're all over the globe. We've got Zionism. People, those of us who deal with, managerial things or run projects, we put down either a flow chart of what comes next. Okay, first we have the breakthrough period. We convince Jews that we need Zionism. We fight the British. We fight the Turks. We fight the British. We fight the war. We fight the Arabs. We establish a state. Back to done. Back to we're done. We're finished. We're done. But Hashem tells Abraham that we have to be in our homeland and be a nation. Now, many can argue or will argue with me, but what I identify there is the first thing is the nation, and many will say that Judaism is a religion. My definition is a little bit different, and I've said it before, that Judaism is first and foremost a nation. The Jewish people are first and foremost a nation. The religious part, or the belief in one God and the fact that Abraham was the one to do away with the idols, that certainly says something about what the future is going to entail. But that is not the only thing that Judaism is about, because to boil us down to a mere religion, I believe is an offense to what we are, because I believe that a nation is what the bigger picture is the nation. And with that is a belief system, a set of rules, a book of rules that Hashem has given us. And actually, why has Hashem given us this book of rules? That's a major question, that the story tells, the Tanakh tells, that he went from nation to nation to nation. And we were the first to say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will hear. We said yes first, call us crazy, okay? But we said yes first. And we didn't receive a gift. At the end of the day, you could potentially see it as a gift, but we received a book of rules and responsibilities to take upon our shoulders. Michael, you wanted to ask a question. Or
No,
did you
I want-
accidentally
I-
raise your hand?
I want to say that we get the land where we put our feet in. If we don't go left or right from Torah.
Very hard to hear you, Michael. Very hard to hear you. Could you repeat that, please?
I said God promised us to capture the land where we put our feet in if we don't go left or right from what he told us. Yes, this week.
If we don't go left or right from the rules. Okay, so here we have, thank you. So here we have a group, Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, okay, Israel, Yaakov, who became Israel. They're in the desert, they receive a book of rules. Now, from the day, and Michael said this now, that Hashem says, go and conquer the land. Go and conquer the land of Israel. We've got a book of rules where we've got tribes. Now we have a piece of land. Yes, God holds the least, Jeff, I agree. I happen to see the comments as they come up. I agree with Jeff. So we already have a set of requirements that come down from above. I mention this in most of my webinars because I have this bee in my bonnet about being called Judaism is a religion. It upsets me, and that's why I tell everyone that the Hebrew language does not originally have a word for religion. The word dat, which is used for religion, originates in Farsi, in Persian. The Hebrew language does not have a word for religion. That is from Persian. Why am I saying this? It's not because Judaism is not a religion, but that's not what it was created for. The purpose is not completely different, but far more complex than that. And with that, we're going to lead up to, wait a second. So the state of Israel is established. We have an official homeland, 2,000 years of exile. The nation is scattered across the globe. Do we need Zionism now? Zionism has achieved its goal, the establishment of the state of Israel. That's what I call a wait, what moment. As in, wait, what? State has been established. What is the purpose of Zionism one day after the establishment of the state of Israel? What for? We already have a state. We already have a state. And if you want to infuriate me, and I've copied this from, I'm going to give him credit because it's his, Neil Lazarus, who does a lot of PR and marketing, and he does a lot of workshops. And this was on his page, he says, we don't have Israel because of the Holocaust, which many people say. We had the Holocaust because there was no Israel. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that we no longer need Zionism because we have the state, so we've solved all of our problems? Does that mean, and I'm throwing questions in the air because this is an intelligent group of people, and I want the wheels to start turning, and I hope this will raise many questions once, I finish speaking so that we can discuss the complexities of the question. Do we only need Zionism in countries where Jews are in a precarious situation? Do we only need Zionism when we need to help Jews escape anti-Semitism? What maintained the Jewish people in 2,000 years of exile? That'll be very late. What helped us stay Jewish? And are Judaism and Zionism separate? Are Judaism and Zionism two separate things?
No.
What came first, actually?
Zionism.
Probably. I agree. If we're going to call Parashat Lech Lecha, the first call on Abraham to establish, the state of Israel, a matter of fact. So Zionism basically became, existed even before the notion of Judaism. The return to, or the return, it wasn't a return though, the going to the promised land. So first came Zionism, then came Judaism. They're intricately connected. There is no Judaism without Zionism, and there is no Zionism without Judaism. You could be pro-Zionist and not be Jewish, that's fine. But they're basically connected to the extent where they cannot be separated. And those that attempt to separate the two harm the Jewish people. Harm the Jewish people, because to call us something that is capable of existing separately from our homeland, to me is a joke. And then unfortunately, in many situations, like for example, in the United States and England, it's a sad joke, because people have taken it to the extreme where it's absolutely nuts, to the extent where they've lost their self-pride, their feeling of belonging to basically anything. I remember in university, and that was a very long time ago, that all these brilliant professors would come up and say, and this was I started studying in the 90s, that the nation state was no longer going to exist. It was, we were going downhill. The nation state was something of the past. New countries weren't going to be established. And we were going to see a decline, and citizens of the world unite. Nationality was really, going to be put on the back burner. Guess what? Iron Curtain fell. How many nation states mushroomed since then? I don't know the exact number, but quite a few. Nationalism is part of being human. Everybody wants their tribe, their community, their chamula, their group. And that's why nationality is something very, very, very important to people. It's similar today, by the way, when somebody says to me, well, metaverse is going to take over the world. We're going to see the world through these whatever 3D funny glasses, and we're not going to have human interaction anymore. Sorry, I don't buy into that. Just like I don't buy into the end of the nation state. Sorry, I don't buy into it. History has proven quite the opposite. And history tends to repeat itself, by the way, unfortunately, by the way. So Zionism today may not mean the need to establish the state of Israel, because we have one, thank God. So then what does it mean today? How many countries do we have represented on this Zoom today? We have Michael. You're in Germany right now, Michael?
Yes, I'm in Germany.
Germany?
Yes.
India? Malaysia, United States, Israel. 5 countries, and I don't know where the other wonderful people are from. I'm just giving you an example without going too far. 5 countries. Imagine that one of the very important parts of Zionism is speaking the Hebrew language. Imagine how lucky we would all be if we could be holding this Zoom in the one language that unites us all. Imagine how grand that would be as a nation if we could be holding this Zoom right now in Hebrew. Imagine if all of you did not speak English as well as you do. Imagine how important it is to the people of Israel that we all across the globe learn to speak Hebrew, our common ancient mother tongue, mamaloshin as we say in Yiddish. That is our mother tongue. Hebrew is Zionism. Hebrew is a crucial part of our unity as a nation. If we weren't Zionists, if we didn't love our people, why would representatives from 5 different countries, if not more, would be sitting on a Zoom call on a Sunday, okay, when many of you have a Hebrew class after this, When Jeff Dunitz woke up before 7 a.m. on a Sunday to listen to me babble, if we didn't believe that our future depends on our being Zionists, what is Zionism today? First and foremost, all of us are responsible for something, even if we don't live in the state of Israel. What are we responsible for? We are responsible for having a relationship with the state of Israel, with our homeland, and to encourage, yes, to encourage, even if you do not live in Israel, the maintenance of the Jewish majority in the state of Israel. Every single one of us has a responsibility, whether you live in Israel or you don't. You don't have to donate money. People used to say back in the day, after the state was established and after the first Sabras, the Israeli born, after the first people were born in Israel and they were Sabras and they were proud and they were prickly like the Sabra fruit, like the cactus. They were prickly and they were suspicious and they were a bit aggressive. After all this happened, they said, you have two options. Either you live here or you don't count. And God help you. If you live in Israel and you leave, you are a yored. What does yored mean? To make aliyah means, literally in English, ascension, to go up. Yerida literally means to go down, and it is a derogatory term, okay? If you are an Israeli that left Israel back in the day, I'm talking about back in the day, and please don't take things out of context because I'm going to continue with this with an explanation as to our situation today. You were perceived as a traitor. You left Israel. Israel isn't for everyone, and I'll get to that in a minute. Zionist youth movements across the globe educated children and young adults. And at 18, you were expected to grow out of the movement and make aliyah. And if you didn't make aliyah, you were then asked to leave. My way or the highway. Now, this is being recorded, and this is very important that I stress this. We still perceive aliyah as the highest level of fulfillment of Zionism. And even after you make aliyah, there's still additional levels of Zionism, mind you. But if we as a nation were to be that Israeli about things, and I could say in some things I'm very Israeli, in some things I'm very American. Some say the best of both worlds, some say the worst of both worlds. It depends on who you're asking at a given moment. But my American side of me says that Hashem graced me with a successful aliyah, albeit it was very hard at the beginning. Mind you, I had the first 4 or 5 years were a nightmare for me. However, I fell in love with Israel. I learned my way around the system, which is a very important thing. And Hashem graced me with success. Baruch Hashem b'lei ayin hara. And for that, I feel I owe the Jewish people. I owe my people to give back. But not everyone is as fortunate as I have been. And it's not about wealth. It's not about anything like that. It's about being able to fall in love with some of the less wonderful things about Israel, and they're not all wonderful. And you know, we say unfortunately that, or fortunately, that God forbid if Hashem, gives us a child which is imperfect, we don't stop loving our child. It's our child. You love, or a family member that's God forbid unwell. You don't stop loving them just because they're unwell. Israel is our homeland. It's the only home we've got. Is it perfect? No, it isn't. Is it ours? You bet. And as ours, we have to love it. We owe it to make it better. We owe ourselves to make it better, but it's ours. Now, things today have changed. Because diaspora has grown considerably and Israel has grown considerably. Do we need to maintain the Jewish majority? You bet. If we do not maintain the Jewish majority, and you can quote me on this, if we do not ensure the Jewish majority in the land of Israel, we lose our right to the land. It's our responsibility to encourage Aliyah, to embrace people who make this big jump, this leap of faith. It's our responsibility to have Jewish babies. It's our responsibility to make a good life for these babies here in Israel. It's our responsibility, and I'm going to say something that may not be popular in America, but in Israel it certainly is, that in times of a pandemic, to do whatever we can to save lives. And I trust Israeli medicine. I'm not going to go into it because I know people here suffer a lot from politics in their countries as far as COVID is concerned and such. We owe it to our country to make it better. Why? Because it belongs to Rivka, because it belongs to Michael, because it belongs to Jeff, because it belongs to Moshe, and because it belongs to me and all the rest of you. It belongs to us. This country belongs to us. Whether we like it or not, it is ours. So what is Zionism today and why is it important? Yes, we could always circle back to Zionism is important because if God forbid we need to save Jews from high-risk countries, we need to have a state of Israel. But it's also important for those who live in comfortable countries, because everyone can live comfortably in another country, knowing in the back of their head that Israel will never again allow for Jews to be harmed in another country. And unfortunately, there's no control over terrorist attacks here and there, as horrible as they are. And God, did we have a miracle last week. But Israel will and is involved every single day with saving Jews. I assure you now, with what's going on in the Ukraine, even without knowing, without hearing any kind of explanation, that the Jewish Agency is already revved up to save Ukrainian Jewry. I promise you that as we sit here, as a member of the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency, I assure you that there is a plan set in place that if the Russians invade or continue with the invasion of the Ukraine, there's a way to evacuate the Jews. I assure you. Why? Because we're one big family. Are we a happy family? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So let's set aside the first reason of the need for Zionism and the need for Israel today is to, be there for high-risk countries. Well, what about countries that aren't high risk? Is there a need for Zionism today in other countries? Can't hear you, Rivka. You're
Of
muted.
course, we need it. We need it, even though
Why?
we're not high risk. Because Zionist education is important for the next generation. Because we, at the moment, for thousands of years, the Jews in India have been living very peacefully without any kinds of problem. However, the tables can turn anytime. And therefore, we need to be equipped with whatever we know, with relationships, with a good relationship with Israel, as individuals and as a people.
So you're also talking about high risk, but what about our neshama, our soul? Why do we need Zionism for our neshama? You're absolutely right. I agree with everything you've said, but let's add another level onto that. I agree completely. There is more, definitely more to it, and what Rivka and the movement, when you people are doing in Herut in India is beyond unbelievable, because you don't have a high risk situation. So the complement is quadrupled, because not even doubled, not even tripled, it's quadrupled. Because if you are set on strengthening your Zionism in a country where there's no high risk and there's no real need for, Zionism as an escape route, then why actually do we need Zionism? Jabotinsky spoke about 3 periods in the life of the Jewish people. First, he said we have to get through the breakthrough period, which was the pre-establishment of the Jewish state. The second part was after the establishment of the state to maintain the Jewish majority in the land of Israel, to create a Jewish majority. By the way, he writes down, and this is crazy, how much of a prophetic Zionist thinker this man was. As I read it today, he was talking about 8 million Jews, 2 million Arabs living in complete peace in the land of Israel. First of all, the numbers are very close to that. Now, are we in complete peace? No, but the numbers are quite unbelievable. And the third step is what Jabotinsky referred to as greater Zionism. Greater Zionism is that stage where we aspire to become a light unto nations. It doesn't mean perfection, because we're human and humans don't tend to be perfect, okay? Quite the opposite, in fact. And Hebrew, I used the example of Hebrew before, and I'm going to circle back to it now, is that the Jewish people, first and foremost, being scattered across the globe, have one thing in common, one major thing in common, and everything sprouts from that, and that is our Zionism. Zionism is our nationhood, our peoplehood, our language, our culture. It is uncanny, it is unbelievable to see traditions of Jews from all over the globe, from all the scattered communities, and you see cultural similarities after thousands of years of exile that are just unbelievable, just absolutely unbelievable. All different things pertaining to Shabbat, to traditions, to holidays. Yes, there's a different food, there's a different spice, there's a different melody, but many of the basics stay. And when I am asked, for example, okay, there's Israel, there's Zionism, you made Aliyah, you've done the highest level of Zionist fulfillment. Karma, why do you still keep kosher? So I am a God-fearing Jew that is not physically, I don't look like a highly observant woman, although I'm a very strong God-fearing Jew. But my reason for kashrut is not because I think Hashem is going to strike down with lightning and, if God forbid I eat something unkosher. I sincerely believe that this is one of the keys that helped us survive exile. One of the key factors that we differentiated ourselves from others in what we ate. Some were willing to die, not to eat pork, not to eat pig, not because Hashem would strike down and kill us, but because that would be bending to our haters. That would be giving into our haters, because this is symbolic of who we are as a nation. My kashrut is a symbol of my nationalism. My sitting at a table and I will eat at a restaurant that's not kosher, and I will ask for a salad, and I will ask for fish. And people ask me, does it bother you if I eat shrimp, octopus, whatever? I said, look, as long as you don't shove it down my throat, it ain't my problem. And I'm dead serious about that, because what other people do is not my business. Live and let live. However, my family knows that our nationality, the Jewish nationhood, relied heavily upon these symbols. These symbols that, this is just one example. The Hebrew language is another. I've heard fantastic stories, by the way, about how in Soviet Union, it was forbidden legally to study Hebrew. Completely forbidden. So a group of Jewish kids would walk, and they would walk one after the other. And how would they hold a Hebrew lesson? They would say a word in Hebrew and would whisper it one to the next, 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 to the back, till the end of the row. And it would be hidden from the Soviets. And this happened. It didn't happen 500 years ago. It happened 40, 50 years ago. In the 70s and in the 80s. This happened. Our Zionism is our culture, is our love for our land, is a centrality of the state of Israel in our lifestyle. Today, even if you do not live in Israel. And honestly, not everyone should live in Israel. Shocker, I know. I'm not trying to say don't make Aliyah. I'm not trying to tell you that it's not important and it's not a fulfillment of Zionism. All I'm trying to say is I don't want people to be forced to live in Israel. Actually, I think it's a privilege to live in Israel. And if somebody doesn't feel that way, they should not. Not because they're bad people, because not everyone is cut out to live here. Not everyone is cut out to live here. I'll be completely honest with you all. God bless him, I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old. In April, God willing, he'll be 17, a boy. Bezrat Hashem, in a year and a half, he'll be drafted into the IDF. If you think I'm not petrified, you're wrong. I'm not brave. I'm nothing. I'm afraid. Do I have a choice? No. Do I know where he'll choose to go? I don't. Do I pray for him and all the soldiers of Israel? Yes, I do. Jeff, that's right. You can tell that to everyone later. I'm definitely afraid, but I have no choice. My husband and I served. Our parents served. My parents were in the United States, but his father served, his brother served, and my kids will serve. My daughter served for 3 years, not for 2. I served for 3, not for 2. And may Hashem bless them all. Do we have a choice? No. Does that make me better than everyone? Absolutely not. Everyone can contribute to the Jewish people. Zionism is our way of unity, of contributing to the general good, to the Klal Israel. Our being part of a Zionist way of thinking, our being part of a love of Israel is part of our maintaining our Judaism and our nationhood for the future. Jewish Zionist education in a country that's not high risk may be harder than those that say, look, you need to remember that one day you may need Israel. And I have found myself in one very high risk community, which Chirut still is active in, and I won't mention for security reasons. Now, I have had conversations with them. There's a mandatory army service for the young men there. And the Jewish men don't want to serve in that foreign army. And I've said to them, you know, you want to live in this country. You don't want to make Aliyah. The only way that you can stay in this high-risk country is if you stay a Zionist, because if you don't support Israel one way or another, you don't deserve to have us back you up, which of course was said in a heated moment, and every Jew deserves to be, you know, to have that security. But does it infuriate me to hear that people, you know, continue to live in countries that are so precarious, and they brush it off because they're comfortable, and they know that, you know, at the blink of an eyelash, batting of an eyelash, Israel will send out fighter planes to save them if need be. I personally took part in a mission to save Jews from Yemen in 2009. And this was something that I was completely baffled by this whole situation. There were approximately 280 Jews left there in Raida and in, I think it was Tzana also, and they didn't want to leave. It was very dangerous. They didn't want to leave, and they were under the influence of the Satmar rabbis who tried to get them to leave to the United States. Mind you, this is an ancient community, that had their own beautiful ways and their traditions and their culture and their food. And the women there are known, first of all, for their beauty and their glorious, you know, their shiny black hair. They're considered absolute beauties. And what did the Satmars do? Send them to the United States, and the first thing it did was shave their heads. Why am I giving this to you as an example? How you take a culture, which is in its own beauty, theoretically completely Zionist, completely loving of Israel, and you spoil them. You create a fear in them that Israel will not be good for them. Israel's a bad country. They taught them the anti-Zionism, basically. They taught them that they're better off in the United States. without their glory, without their culture. Of course, their ways and traditions and food were thrown out the window. So in 2009, we managed, and this sounds almost unbelievable, we managed to get 10 Jews to come to Israel out of 280. The rest didn't want to come. And I definitely can tell you that this was a challenge. And I found what Satmar did, not only being anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and the way that they treated the Jews of Yemen as completely horrific. It's proof of how we know how to be our very own enemies. And Jews are, you know, we seem to be wonderful experts at everything, including that, unfortunately. So we can either be indifferent or we can be pro-Zionist, because obviously people who came onto this conversation can't be Jew-hating Jews. And I believe that indifference is not an option. I believe that today indifference is not an option. The Jewish people are, Jeff, how many are we around the globe today? You'll probably know that. Approximately 15 million? Something like that? Jeff, something like that, 15 million? More or less. 13, 14, 15 million, that's it. That's it. That's what the Jewish people are. What kind of a future do we have with all of those around the globe in maintaining our Judaism if we are not Zionists? If we are not Zionists, if we allow high-risk Jewish communities to say, I don't care about, you know, the future of Israel, I don't want a connection to Israel, and then 2% of the population, oh my God, that's nothing. That's insane. What do we do with these high-risk communities that don't care about Zionism in Israel? We educate. We go in and we educate, even if they don't want it, by the way. We force it upon them. In a subtle way, you know, we have to package it properly. We don't want to create anger, and we don't want to make them, you know, feel that they're being attacked. It can start with the teachings of the Jewish holidays, because I believe that every single Jewish holiday is a Zionist holiday. Every single holiday, you can find the connection to the land of Israel and Zionism, if you try. You can start by holidays. You can start by telling stories. How do we maintain the connection between our people? How do we make sure that the future of the Jewish people is secure? The only way to do that is Jewish Zionist education. The only way to ensure that there is a future, the only way to ensure that our children know where they come from, and that after us, they will continue keeping kosher, the holidays, building a sukkah, all the little things, you know, building the sukkah, lighting the Chanukiah, celebrating Independence Day in Israel, because it belongs to every single one of us. Whether we feel that we have a connection to Israel or we don't, we do. You can't shake it. We're blood relatives. Anyway, and whatever you do with it, we are blood relatives. Now, I've spoken way too long, but Rivka, if anyone would like to find the fun in every holiday, Jeff says, absolutely. Absolutely. In order to maintain, pardon, yes, please.
Okay, carry on, Karma. I thought you were done.
No, I did finish. I just wanted to sum it up by saying that Zionism is probably the only thing that will ensure the future of the Jewish people.
Thank you. Thank you, Karma.
Thank you.
The presentation and the elaboration on Zionism. I have a question here from Liji. He says, Israel is incomplete without the 12 tribes and the temple. What's the role of Zionism in establishment of the temple and bringing the lost tribes?
Okay, that's a two-pronged question. About the establishment of the temple, I would say that That's a political question here in Israel. It's not certainly not a national religious question, because on Temple Mount, on our holy site Temple Mount, a mosque was built, as everyone knows. And I'm a wife of a Cohen. I'm an Eshet Cohen. So, and my husband happens to be an engineer, God bless him. So he would be more than honored to do the system, the system building for the third temple, God willing. But the aspiration for the Zionists and the believers in the importance of the temple is that in our lifetime, we will see the establishment of the third temple. Do I think that it's something doable? Right now in this situation, it seems unfortunately very far from us because of the political mess in which we are living, and even our own people, and the liberation of Judea, Samaria, Gaza, East Jerusalem, the liberation in '67. The first thing that Moshe Dayan did was, to say that this will not be Temple Mount again. The Al-Aqsa can stay. He referred to it as a negotiation tool. No, this is a good card for negotiating. Instead of saying this is ours, liberate it, build a temple. As we said before, we tend to be our own worst enemies. So the establishment of the third temple is a dream. Will we see it in our lifetime? I really don't know, but it's definitely something to aspire to. I forgot the second half of the question. I apologize.
The second part of the question is, what's the role of Zionism in bringing back the lost tribes?
So again, this refers to basically what you believe as a Jew. As I said before, and this is not something to be, to dishearten people on this Zoom call or to dishearten people, Jews that believe in unity. It's just a fact, and I honestly believe that this was always the situation. I created a workshop called the 10% of the 10%. People always like to say that, oh, so few Jews are leaders and so few care about the future of the Jewish people, and most are indifferent, and most only want to live their lives, and most don't really care, yada, 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 yada. I don't believe that the numbers now are lower than they were before. I believe that there is always a very significant group of Jews that cares about the bigger picture. It's not the majority. I would say today, and I'll be very careful in what I'm saying, that there is a growing understanding that there are many, many emerging Jewish communities and descendants of the 10 tribes, or the lost tribes, that would like to come home. Or coming home doesn't necessarily mean to Israel, but to the Jewish people. And that unfortunately, we tend to be very vocal on our xenophobia and very vocal on our fear of diluting the sanctity of ultra-Orthodox Judaism, and I'm saying ultra-Orthodox for a reason, by bringing in groups that aren't cookie cutter, don't fit into the exact shape of what the Haredi system has been looking into. Ministry of Diaspora and former governments did a very serious, ran a very serious research in the Far East and in Latin America. And they turned around and they came up with numbers of communities, insane numbers of those who believed that they were affiliated, descendants of tribes, Jews. Are they all? Is it something that we should check with DNA? I recently, and I didn't watch the video, received a video from a very well-known Igbo from Nigeria who are practicing Hebrews very, very similar to us. And it's actually quite uncanny, because my knee-jerk reaction when I had a discussion with them was, well, the government of Israel won't give you the right time of day because all of you want to make Aliyah. And I was corrected. Basically even put in my place and said, no, my dear, we do not want to come and live in the state of Israel. We are descendants of the tribe of, I don't remember, forgive me, but we want to establish another Hebrew state in Africa. And it was like, whoa, was not expecting that. And the story of the Igbos is unbelievable. If that's of interest, we can always ask Yirmiyahu, who is our expert on the topic in the movement on our staff, to give a presentation. It's unbelievable. The practice of halachic Judaism. It's uncanny. It's just something you watch and you're like, it's just unbelievable. And it's very typical, by the way, the behavior of these tribes and these groups, and there are a lot of Igbos. And in addition to that, also they were victims of horrible anti-Semitism. Everything that went on in Biafra, I am not particularly knowledgeable on this, I must be honest, but the more I meet with Nigerian Jews, the more taken aback I am at the similarities and how, for no better way of putting it, Jewish they are. It's almost unbelievable how very Jewish. So if you're asking me what's being done, certainly not enough. You know, my logic is potentially a crazy logic. I believe that, you know, any Jews that want to be part of the Jewish majority of the state of Israel and help us maintain this majority should be embraced. We need numbers, and nobody is trying to bring in non-Jews, and nobody's trying to bring in practicing Christians, and nobody's trying to bring in, it's not that, God forbid. We're talking about people who are part of the tribe, for no better way of putting it. And as an American from a Russian family who immigrated to the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, we have almost 450,000 Russian speakers in Israel who are not halachically Jewish. If anything in this government is positive, and I won't get into the government positive yes or no, because I don't think it's relevant for our conversation. But one thing that is being done is an attempt to offer these 450,000 I don't want to say user-friendly, but I do want to say user-friendly, halachic conversion that they can live with, because first of all, they are from Zera Israel, they're the seed of Israel, because they have Jewish blood. They came to live in Israel, and many of them want to be practicing Jews. I don't know on what level of orthodoxy or observance, I'm not sure. And you want to know something? It's none of my business. The country offered the children that were drafted into the IDF, they were offered the Nativ program. Many of them did it and are now halachic Jews. If we don't offer our Russian brothers and sisters the opportunity to convert a halachic conversion, we're adding to assimilation. It's almost as if the Haredis are adding to assimilation. And this was said to me by a Haredi, an ultra-Orthodox rabbi. Rabbi Amsalem said to me, if we don't give them a friendly entrance to the Jewish people, what will happen? They will be discouraged. A Jewish woman or a Jewish man will fall in love with somebody from former Soviet Union who is not a halachic Jew. They will not be able to marry them in the state of Israel. They will go to Cyprus, and we lost 2 people. We didn't gain 1, we lost 2. So, as I said, Israel's not perfect. As a movement, we aspire to bring in tribes that have been lost, for no better way of putting it. We embrace emerging Jewish communities, and I'm going to say something that may not sound politically correct, but I think it's in my vested interest to have as many allies as I can. If you guys are, some people are out there crazy enough to convert to Judaism, and I don't embrace you, then you should have my head. I mean, what kind of beyond the mitzvah, beyond Hashem's, command, to embrace the ger, to not only to embrace that the ger is a higher tzaddik, is a higher being than a born Jew, who the hell are we to say no to people? I mean, just go back to the book of Ruth. Just go back. Okay, so today you need a process. I understand that. We're not talking about, you don't declare tomorrow morning, my people, your people, my God, your God, my God. Okay, fine, process. But embrace people. Don't throw them out of the circle just because you're afraid. Just because as a gatekeeper, you can't get past your own idiosyncrasies, fears, xenophobia, etc. It has been said more than once, and I'm sorry I elaborated completely on this question, that how lucky we are to have Gerim, because if we were only Jews, first of all, the Ashkenazis certainly came from the same 30 families, so we'd probably be institutionalized at this point by marrying within the family, so we'd be completely crazy. And the healthy way of thinking that a ger brings into the Jewish people, because this person is a Jew of choice. The term of choice says everything. Out of freedom of choice, people have taken upon themselves the rules of Judaism. This is major. This is something unbelievable. So we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to bring back Jews that have been left out. And we have a responsibility to be, inclusive of those who have made that crazy move to be part of the Jewish people. That was
Thank you,
a little
Karma.
long-winded. My pleasure.
Thank you. Jeff has a comment here. I think you all read the comment regarding the Amida. So I'm going to pass that. Just read it, please. I'm going to the questions. Okay. Liji has another question here. How far the involvement of Zionism in the present political scenario, bringing unity among the diverse groups in Israel today?
How involved is Israeli politics?
How far is the involvement of Zionism in the present political scenario, bringing unity amongst the diverse groups in Israel at present?
I think that if I take the WZO, the World Zionist Organization, and its involvement in Israeli society is existent but somewhat minor. I think that like all good Jews, we like to argue more than to work together, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, and this is something unusual about Israelis and Jews maybe, that when push comes to shove, if there's ever a real threat, we will be there for one another. And that for me is the most Zionist of all. And it's proven time and time again. So I believe that there is a very strong feeling of Zionism, be it right, be it left. The extremes in Israel are far less obvious than in other countries. Certainly, even the quote unquote extreme left in Israel is non-comparable to what goes on in the United States. I mean, I'll take an Israeli left-winger any day over what's going on in the States now, over the J Streeters and those horrible self-hating Jews, Jew-hating Jews, as Jeff says.
Okay, Jeff has a question here. Do you find that the more free countries tend to be the least Zionist because they don't want people to wear their faith on their sleeve? Very good question, Jeff.
It's actually, it really depends on the country, but I would say that patriotic countries that are free tend to have strong patriotic groups of all types. And the United States is going through a bad period. I don't have to tell you that, but I would say that French Jewry is very patriotic and very Zionist. And Argentinian Jews are very outspoken. I'm looking, at different countries. England's going through a major crisis now.
Yeah.
England it's even more problematic in the United States because it's such a small Jewish community and it's a relatively small country. So it's a nightmare there. But England would fit into that example of, yes, it's a free country and therefore Judaism is already becoming a problem. Theoretically, they don't want to stand out for sure, except for if you're a radical Muslim, then it's okay. You can be a radical Muslim, that's fine. In fact, now there's a very serious crisis within the Board of Deputies in England, and they're shutting up Jews. You're not allowed to speak up and speak out. You're not allowed to, other Jews are silencing one another. So it really depends on the country, Jeff, I want to say. Maybe the more democratic ones are the more problematic. Maybe England and the United States are bad examples now because of the excessive freedom there. Maybe that sort of does fit into that category.
Karma, I have a question. You mentioned about Argentina. What is the situation about the emerging Jewish communities in Latin America?
That's a very interesting question. Argentina has less of a problem. It's more of a European-oriented country, and the Jewish community there is more European. And out of the Latin American countries, it's theoretically the more snobbish one. I think Brazil is an excellent example of emerging Jewish communities, as opposed to what we see in India, for example. We have I'm sure there are quite a few emerging communities, but there's a clouding over by Jews for Jesus communities. They're not called that, but they're Messianic Jews. There are enormous groups of Messianic Jews there that, mix some sort of odd mix of Catholicism and Judaism. And it's very hard to differentiate, especially when you're a movement like Herut that wants to come and open its arms to all Jews. And you have to reach that first question of, do you believe in Jesus? And then some will say, well, he was a Jew, he was a prophet, and then it boils down to, at the end of the day, hell will boil over, Jesus will come, and there'll be a resurrection, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But Brazil had, it's interesting, before the last World Zionist Congress, one of the political parties that ran in Brazil, and Herut's not active in Brazil as of yet, registered quite a few of these Messianic Jews. And it came up in the election campaign, and in order not to create a stink, it was agreed to have an agreement and not, how do you check who is a Jew? How do you start to, what do you have to show? And they reached, through negotiation, they reached an agreement so as not to question Judaism. It's a very, very sensitive topic, very hard to deal with.
So that means that even Messianic Jews can join the Zionist movement. Are they considered Jewish?
No.
Or the WZO accepts them as members? No. Okay.
WZO does not, but they can be untruthful. They can, if they don't reveal themselves, if they don't reveal who they are, or if a Jewish group decides to include them to enlarge their numbers and ignores the fact that they're Messianic, well, how do we know? How could we know?
Yeah, we would.
So you have to be very, very, very careful. I draw the line. I don't ask people how they pray, who they pray, how many times a day they pray. That's none of my business. But any Jesus agenda, nope.
Yeah. Thank you. Jeff said, I am HO, they aren't Jewish, they are Christian. Yes, absolutely. Do we have any more? Do we have any more questions? Mordecai, any questions on this topic or any topic with regards to Israel and the land? Okay, Michael, go ahead, please, Michael.
I wanted to say why we need Zionist education in countries that are not hostile to us. When we look at Germany before the war, in the times the First World War, the Jewish people were absolutely accepted. They drafted into the army. They wanted to volunteer in the army, but their culture assimilated more and more to the German one. And without the Holocaust, would the intermarriage rate also getting higher. When we look at these countries where there's no hostility, the Jewish culture gets often watered down. We need it.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. If there's no more questions, I think we can wrap it up. Before any questions, any comments? Robert Soffer, any comments? Okay, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Karma, so much. And thank you so much. It was very interesting. I love this kind of a Q&A. You know, it's free flowing and, you know, it gets people to think. So thank you so much. Thank you very much,
Thank
Karma,
you.
Jeff,
Thank you.
and everyone who's here. I appreciate your you coming and listening in and educating yourself about Zionism. And please tune in for next month. We will have another webinar next month, perhaps on the Igbo Jews, something different, and you know, we can learn another culture and why are they Igbo Jews and where do they come from. So keep your eyes out on our next webinar next month. So thank you so much. I have a Hebrew class in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for the
Shabbat
opportunity.
Thank you. Shabbat Tov.
Shabbat Tov, everyone.
Shabbat
And
tov.
Shabbat tov. Thank
have a wonderful
you.
evening. Thank you.
You too.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.